Okay, so we want the nav bar width to 100%. We have the display set up as an inline block, and as we're seeing in our page, the hyperlinks are not taking up the full width of the page. So let's dig a little bit deeper, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to put a border around the um, nav bar. So now you'll see that the nav bar is taking up 100% width. And what the issue we're having is that these hyperlinks are inline elements. So let's go ahead and take care of some of that. So we want to say the nav bar hyperlinks. And again, this is a little bit more advanced CSS. Our selector is we're going into the nav bar and we're selecting all of the anchor tags in the nav bar. We're going to set that display to inline block. And then we can set a width on those elements. So the width, we have 4 of them. Let's make it 25%. We don't get the full 100%. So you'll notice that we have the word wrap there. So instead of using 25%, let's use 20%. And now you'll notice that those hyperlinks are spanning across the page. Not exactly the way we want them to be linked together. And the reason why is if we dig a little bit deeper, so let's dig a little bit deeper, we're going to take the border off of the nav bar and apply them to the anchor tags. So the borders off the nav bar applied to the anchor tags within the nav bar. So you'll notice that we're taking up 80% of the width of the screen, so 20 for each of the hyperlinks. But then the hyperlinks themselves are left justified to the block that it's taking up. So we can align these hyperlinks using text align, and I'm going to center them. And now our nav bar looks a little bit cleaner. It's distributed across the top of the page. Okay, so we're using inline block elements. And the idea with an inline block element is we don't have the word wrap, so it's not going to take up all the space, but it does allow us to set a width. So those inline elements are treated kind of as a hybrid block element. And that's what that display equaling inline block is that we're using here in our style sheet. Okay, secondarily, we wanted to style our style sheets, or I'm sorry, our lists. We have these styled lists. So we have the class for our unordered list, we have the class for our ordered list. I want to style both of them. The way I select both of them is I use that class selector. So I'm saying I want this style rule to apply to any element that that has this class. The way I do that is I say I have the styled list, and now all of these style rules will apply to any element that has that class. So the dot is an indication that we're talking about a class selector. So we can just go ahead and change the background to some color. So let's say we choose like cornflower blue. Okay, so now you'll notice that our lists are a different color. And then we can go further. So just kind of like we did with the nav bar, we can say I want to take that styled list, and I'm talking about any list item inside of it, and I can change the background to a different color. So now I'm just going to choose blue, so I have blue on blue. Okay, it looks kind of ugly, but the idea is that the selection changed. Okay, and then the follow-up to this is if I'm looking at these list items, notice they take up the full width of the screen. Those list items, I want you to start taking note of all of these elements, whether it's changing background colors or putting borders on them or just positioning things next to them. Take notice of, is this an inline element or is it a block element? And since these list items are going the full width of the screen, those list items are block elements. Okay, I can change that. So if that's not the behavior that I want, so if I want those list items to be inline elements, I can change the display to be inline. And now you'll notice that it looks quite a bit different. Okay, not necessarily the way I want them to be, or kind of not necessarily their natural display. And since it's not their natural display, I'm going to get rid of that. And then you'll notice that the list changes quite a bit. Okay, so really what I'm talking about with these style rules is not necessarily to make it look nice or anything like that. Really what we're talking about is how do I select an element to style it? And if it's a single element that I want to style and it's unique on the page, then typically I'm going to use the ID attribute in conjunction with an ID CSS selector to style that element. If it's a group of elements that I all want to all have the same style and the same style rules, then typically I'm going to use a class attribute. So here's the class attribute. And then I can apply it to multiple items. So I have the class attribute applied to multiple items. And then I'm going to use that class selector to say, this is how I want those items styled. Okay, so at this point, I really want you to start to take notice in CSS. We can select all of the tags using a tag name. We can select an individual element by using an ID selector. Or we can select a group of elements that are similar or should be styled similarly using a class selector. Okay, so those three different selectors are going to come into play throughout this course.